I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're having our very first drive in this crucial new SUV next to me. This is the Zeekr 7X. It'll be the third Zeekr product to launch in Australia, and if you haven't heard of this brand yet, you probably will soon. It's another Geely brand, the owners of Volvo and Polestar, but Zeekr tell us they are the strongest of the Chinese EV brands. They're expecting to stick around and sell quite a few cars. The 7X is going to be maybe their most popular model when it launches in Australia. Right into mid-size SUV territory, that's where cars like the Tesla Model Y play. And of course, that is a target for the 7X. But as we'll see in today's video, it actually sits a little bit upmarket of where the Tesla is in terms of materials and even how it drives. So I'm expecting the price to be a bit north of that car. Anyway, let's settle in for our first drive today. Before we get started, hit subscribe below.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by Budget Direct. So walking up to the 7X, clean styling along the side, and we also have electric doors, at least here in China, a bit like a BMW i7, which means you jump in, you put your foot on the brake, and the door closes. Now that sounds like a gimmick, but it's actually something that you get used to quite quickly, trust me. But we need to talk about the cabin of the 7X. Now, I've actually got a relatively low-end version here, which I think could start around the sort of $70,000 mark in Australia. And if it did that, then I think it could be reasonably competitive. A light interior color scheme on this vehicle and really nice interior materials. Now, it's not sort of traditional luxury in terms of being leather and wood lined. I know that not everything I'm looking at here is real, but at least it all has sort of a heavy veneer of softness and quality to it. Now, if you don't want a white interior, you don't have to have one. There are other color choices, but I like the layout. And something Zeekr is focusing on is the fact that it's not like a Tesla in terms of how it drives, but especially the interior. We have a conventional cabin with a normal instrument cluster up here with your speedo and your trip computer and media and stuff right in front of you. And then here in the center, a 16-inch touchscreen with software that I've found reasonably easy to use on the Zeekrs that I've driven in Australia. Plus it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and a good hi-fi stereo too. Steering wheel is a Squircle. We've got real physical shortcuts. We've got real indicator and direction selector, dual smartphone chargers, some physical controls for things like your volume, opening the glove box, and drive modes, but your climate is going to be on the screen, as well as things like controls for the air suspension, which is fitted to this car. Nicely done cup holders down here. This material is marking a little bit, I will say. And then one of those cool glove boxes that opens from both sides. And check out the key. It's just a little square in this car. So seats feel comfy to me. Heated and cooled, which is nice. Very, very soft. This will be a little bit too soft for some. It's not sort of a German style hard seat. You sort of sink into it. On the whole though, I've got to say I like the styling of the interior. Let's check out the back seat. In terms of getting into the 7X, here in China there are little buttons outside to open the door. It'll be integrated into the door handle in Australia, just a small change, but the doors will still be electric, which is pretty cool. Now, in terms of accommodations in the back, you can see we're benefiting from the huge wheelbase on the 7X. Massive legroom, good tow room, and also very good headroom, even with this car's fitment of a panoramic sunroof. Now, it is just another one of those glass roofs that doesn't open, but at least it's got a thick blind, which works extremely well. It's a sunny day here in Hangzhou, or at least a bright day. Here in the cabin, it's nice and dark and cool. So the room is good. All those fancy materials continue. And we even have, look at this, just beautifully integrated sun blinds. Now, how much of this stuff comes to Australia and in what trim levels isn't all entirely known. What I can tell you is that we've got this center armrest here, which is a very solid piece. We may or may not get the screen. It might be in high trims, but this piece will definitely come. Here we've got flock lining and USB-C ports for the rear passengers, all nicely integrated. So this is where the 7X feels like a cut above your Tesla Model Y. Certainly the Model Y's got a nice interior now with good quality after the facelift, but it doesn't have all of these luxury amenities. Down here as well, couple of little trays, and you'll notice the flat floor, or reasonably flat floor, which means you'll get 5 people into the 7X without too much of a problem. Not a 3-row vehicle, just a well-proportioned 5-seater. I've seamlessly moved to the other seat now, and you're starting to see a few of the ways that the 7X is a cut above something like a Model Y. Another way is down here. we are going to get this seat adjustment in Australia. So you can see we've actually got a thigh extender, which is crazy. I can't remember seeing that in the back of anything other than like an S-Class. We can adjust fore and aft, and then we also have backrest recline. Plus over here on the door, we can, nope, that's the window. We can move this front seat well and truly out of the way. Now this is a common feature in Asian cars over here in China and other Asian markets. Not so common in Australia, but you can really stretch out. Again, this is the kind of feature you normally see in a big, large luxury SUV, not so much in the mid-size space. Kids who ride back here don't know how good they've got it. I certainly didn't have this when I was growing up. Moving around the back now, if it's a little bit noisy, it's because we are at a little Gymkhana test track outside of Hangzhou in China. So there are some cars making cool noises, but we're here to talk about the rear end and the boot. Now, I actually don't mind the subtle styling of the 7X. Compared to some vehicles from new brands and even established brands in Australia, I think you would call the design relatively conservative, but the proportions work for me, even on this relatively low-end car on small wheels. Power tailgate is of course standard. That opens up to reveal a good sized boot. Load height isn't too high, it's square, it's conventional. We've got 60 folding rear seats, which actually fold electrically in this car. Plus we have air suspension, so you can even lower the height of the vehicle with the buttons here in the back, which is really nice. Household power point is good. Hopefully that comes to Australia. Big box underneath the boot floor too. And then there's even some extra storage going right back. Like most EVs, no spare, but hey, at least it's roomy. Plus a control up here to close that boot. That means it's time for us to talk about range and charging. You need to be careful about the Zeekr 7X's range claims because the huge numbers sometimes published online are based on China's lenient CLTC testing regime. Thankfully, there are official WLTP numbers that are a bit closer to reality. 2 batteries are globally available, a 71 kilowatt-hour usable LFP pack paired with single-motor rear-wheel drive for 480 kilometers of range, or a 94 kilowatt-hour usable NMC battery with either rear-wheel drive for 615 k's of range or all-wheel drive with 543 kilometers. Certainly, the efficiency figures aren't quite Model Y frugal, but they aren't too bad. But unlike the Tesla, the Zeekr 7X uses an 800-volt platform with 360 kilowatt peak DC charging speeds, promising a 10 to 80% charge at a compatible charger of as little as 13 minutes with the small battery or 16 minutes with the big battery. And as we go into the driving component, I apologize for limited B-roll. Shooting in China isn't as straightforward as we're used to. Okay, let's take a drive in the Zeekr 7X. We're on the public road here in China, which is actually not that easy to do. Had to go and... Yes, she is going to pipe up from time to time, that's okay. Had to go off and get my Chinese driving license, but all worth it because we're now on the road in the 7X. So what will you be able to choose? Well, the Australian range is still being determined, but it's very likely we'll be able to have a rear-wheel drive and an all-wheel drive dual motor, at least those two. But the LFP battery's charging speed is actually incredible. Over here in China, it is capable of charging from 10 to 80% in 10.5 minutes. Now, Australia does not have the same level of peak DC charging infrastructure as China, but even on a 350 kilowatt charger, you're looking at around 12-13 minutes in the LFP version of the 7X, which is about half the time it would take to charge a Model Y with a smaller battery. So an interesting sort of advantage opening up there for the Zeekr. There's other stuff like air suspension, which we talked about when we were having a look at the boot, which is definitely a cut above and typically the sort of thing which you'd find reserved for, $100,000 combustion SUVs in Australia. So kind of interesting to see that level of sophistication in a product, which we are being softened up to think will be sort of 70 grand, maybe plus on-road costs. So what are those specifications? Well, I'm driving the rear-wheel drive right now, the single motor. It's got 310 kilowatts of power, which is plenty. Only 440 newton meters of torque, which is a bit unusual. And that explains why the 0 to 100 time is only about 6 seconds. So it's not that fast, even though it's got heaps of power. You can option about a half-strength front motor in the dual motor all-wheel drive, which has got 470 kilowatts of combined power. that really amps up the performance. It'll do 0 to 100 in 3.8 seconds. And that's the one which I drove on the Gymkhana. It feels real quick, but it definitely bucks on its air suspension back and forth. Now you've got 3 adjustable damping modes: Comfort, Standard, and Sport. Comfort is pretty soft. Standard is, well, the middle setting, and Sport is not really that firm. Now, like the rest of the Zeekr products, the suspension will be retuned for Australia. And I don't think it's actually starting off a terrible base. There's not that many bumps in the roads here in China, so it is kind of hard to give you a really solid impression of the ride quality. But the ones that I've seen, I've been aiming for. And I would say that the ride is not bad in terms of the Chinese market situation, but definitely we'll be looking for a more nuanced suspension tune in Australia, which has some, a combination of good body control with decent compliance. And I definitely think there's probably a little bit of discipline that needs to be engineered into some of the suspension reactions. Specifically, when you strike a bump, you do get quite a galumphy kind of reaction as the heavy wheel falls down into the bump. The degree to which that sort of thing can be controlled will be interesting to see in the Australian suspension tuning program. So ride quality seems like a reasonable basis to start from. Let's see where they get it to in terms of local tuning. Steering, no real road feel, but just like the 7 GT, which I've also been driving over here, the ratio running through the steering is actually quite comfortable, and the handling feels quite natural. I can definitely tell you at low speeds, you do feel the body moving around a little bit as you exercise the control surfaces of the car, but it all feels relatively intuitive and comfortable and pretty unremarkable to drive. I do like the ratio in the steering though. You kind of get exactly the response that you expect as you start turning the wheel. There is also a high performance version. With the right sort of tuning, that could be an interesting cut price Macan Turbo rival, I reckon. Yeah, motor tuning's really nice. Picks up quickly and linearly. Doesn't sort of throw you into the back of the seat, but accelerates crisply. And the regen braking's really nice in the tuning. So there's a 1-pedal drive mode. I've backed it off to not 1 pedal, but it's still reasonably strong regen. And once you get stuck into the brake pedal, that feels reasonably natural as well. Ergonomics are good, stalks are where you want them to be, information readout is clear. Safety-wise, we've got lots of cameras around the car. LiDAR sensor is not guaranteed for our market, but it's the sort of thing which I'd be keen to see in Australia as regulations allow. Zeekr is pretty proud of their development of semi-autonomous driving, so leaving those sorts of sensors off the car might be a bit of a shame as that technology starts developing. So that's our first look at the Zeekr 7X. Now we've had our first drive over here in China. What's going to be important is how this vehicle drives on Australian roads, which tend to have quite unique features in terms of camber in corners, the style of bumps we have, the surface changes. And how this vehicle's suspension reacts to all that will probably determine how strong it is as a contender in our home country. But in terms of its styling, its interior, its specifications, really impressive things like those quick charging speeds, on paper, the 7X looks very impressive. How it drives and how much it costs will be absolutely central to how competitive this vehicle is back home. That's my opinion. Keen to know yours. Let us know below in the comments. While you're there, hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.